clearwaterbahais.org for emails and text messages. You can sign up there and contact us. We welcome all of you. Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday. It's about 11 a.m. We're happy to have all of you here as we start today's session. We have with us Dr. William Maxwell. Today's topic is the blueprint, why your imagination is your most valuable asset. A bio for Dr. Maxwell is in order. We also want to let you all know he has spoken and we've had him already here on clearwaterbahais.org. We streamed on Zoom and YouTube and Facebook his previous presentation when he visited the Clearwater Baha'i Center. Today on Zoom, we welcome him once more to discuss the blueprint, why your imagination is your most valuable asset. Now, a quick intro. He became a Baha'i in 1952, just before graduating from Oregon State University. Soon thereafter, he was deepened in the faith at the Geyserville Summer School and in the Baha'i community of Berkeley, California. He was drafted to the U.S. Army in 1953, accorded him non-combatant status. He was assigned to the Medical Corps and sent to Korea to serve at the 43rd M.A.S.H, the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. I imagine some of you may have seen the show M.A.S.H. That gives a good idea, I think. He was the first U.S. soldier to be honorably discharged in Korea in 1955 to teach at a university there, where he became the first Baha'i pioneer to that country during Shoyi Effendi's 10-year crusade between 1953 and 1963. He has served on local spiritual assemblies in Gwangju, Korea, Daegu, Korea, Seoul, Korea, Kaduna, and Port Harcourt, Nigeria, Raleigh, North Carolina, Phoenix, Arizona, Suva, Fiji. He has served as an auxiliary board member in Northeast Asia under Hand of the Cause Agnes Alexander and Northeast US and Canada under Hand of the Cause Zikrullah Khadem. He was the first chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly of Northeast Asia, headquartered in Tokyo back in 1957. He was also elected to the National Spiritual Assemblies of the United States on 2 different decades between pioneering in Korea, Nigeria, and Fiji. He is probably the only Baha'i in the world to serve on 4 national spiritual assemblies, being elected chairman of 3. In 1968, he was among the first appointees to the newly established Continental Board of Counselors with responsibility for Northwest Africa. Now, I can say a lot more. He's offered several courses in many places around the world. His favorite course is God Passes By, Parenting, and the Power of Dreams to Improve Individuals and Cultures. For those of you, God Passes By, if you have not heard of that book, it's written by Shoyi Effendi. Definitely give it a read. Go to www.oceanlibrary.com. You can find God Passes By there. Academically, William earned his doctorate at Harvard University and has written or edited 17 books published by such publishers as Collier Macmillan, London Baraka Press, Kaduna, Nigeria, Franklin Institute Press, Philadelphia. Some have been translated and published in French, Korean, and Albanian. His most popular is SuperParenting, Child Rearing for the New Millennium, available from Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com. So with that said, we welcome Dr. William Maxwell once more. Today's topic, to repeat, is the blueprint, why your imagination is your most valuable asset. Welcome, Dr. Maxwell. Thank you for allowing me to give that, what actually was a lengthy intro. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you.
I didn't allow you. I suffered through it. But thank you for the introduction, and I'm honored to be here in Clearwater. I understand that your broadcasts, your archives are available around the world, and I'm honored to be a part of that system. You are a leader in promulgating the Baha'i Faith using the technology that God intended for us to have to promote this religion. Thank you very much. Before I respond to the topic that you in Clearwater chose, the blueprint that is the imagination, I want to give a 2-minute commercial to a fireside that I attended just 2 nights ago, Friday night in Flagstaff, Arizona. It was a fireside on proofs for the existence of God. And that particular fireside was given by a wonderful person, a man named David Langness, who's also the author of several books and who's been a Baha'i almost as long as I have. Mr. Langness talked about the 4 proofs that Abdu'l-Baha summarized in the some answered questions. The reason that particular book, that particular talk struck my soul was that when I became a Baha'i in 1952, I had become utterly and disgusted with all the religions of the world because they had all betrayed their trust. For example, Christianity, by and large, for 2,000 years had approved of slavery. Islam had denied women a voice in the affairs of their nations. All these crimes against the evolution of humanity struck me as a violation of the covenant of God. And so I disdained all the revealed religions, overlooking their many contributions. And suddenly the Baha'is gave me a book that opened my eyes to the reality. And the book simply said, I'm paraphrasing, the world is walking in darkness because it is out of touch with God. Most fundamental religious teaching of all is that God exists, that he exists within us. He wants to connect to us. He wants to perfect us. That fundamental teaching had been lost by the existing world religions, but the Baha'i Faith promised to restore that intimate relationship we humans have with God. And so I recommend anyone in this listening audience who wants to join the crusade to reconnect with God, to listen to David Langness' Fireside. If you don't listen to it, invite him to your home, virtually or otherwise, to talk about the existence, the proofs for the existence of God, all of which were discovered by pagans or non-religious people long ago, but which religions have forgotten. So that's my commercial. Read, invite, study, host David Langness, a wonderful Baha'i who was an assistant at age 17 to Hand of the Cause, William Sears, that all Baha'is love and admire. That's the commercial. Now my talk. The imagination. The first person that I know of in the literature to exalt the imagination part of the mind to a preeminent position was Maria Montessori. She did not know the research, but she did observe children. She observed children very closely. She was a medical doctor, taught, of course, to observe patients and clients, which she did. But her real love was to see the beauty, the presence of God in the hearts and faces of children. And so her major books deal with allowing children, training children to exercise their imagination. which was contrary to the educational dogmas of the day, that is, in the 19th and early 20th century. But let me give you a summary, anecdotal summary, of why the imagination is critical to the evolution of our species, and why the Baha'i Faith exalts it also to a preeminent position in the mind, and how I'll give you some clues where you and I can think about how do we train that power that the mind has to create. Well, my first anecdote is personal. By age 6, all children, including me, have understood the language, not only the language spoken, but the unspoken language represented by the culture. We know the rules of life, pretty much, the rules of grammar, the rules of life, the rules of our culture, pretty much by age 6. By age 6, I knew my father was a good man, a very intelligent man, an entrepreneurial man. But I also knew that he had many faults. I knew all of the faults. I think I knew all of his faults. And I decided about age 6, I'm going to be a better father than my father. By the way, I verified that anecdotal evolution of myself by asking a lot of other people, when did you decide to become a real man and be a real father in your life? For example, the brightest family in Britain, the Britain's brainiest family, as they call in the media, a man named Imafidon and his wife, Anne Marie Imafidon, Professor Dr. Imafidon. I spent many weeks with that family in London and in Nigeria and so on. Dr. Imafidon, when did you decide that you wanted to find a lady who would be your wife so that you could be a great father? Now, he was the son of the bishop of Nigeria, the Episcopal bishop of Nigeria. And he said to me, I decided at age 6. And I asked Mrs. Imafidon, when did you decide that you wanted to be a mother and you wanted a man who could help you raise your children? She said that she too decided at age 6 that she wanted to find a good husband in the future. That anecdote of mine, though, is male. What about we women? When do they start to think about being a mother? Every child you know at age 2 begins to practice, rehearse being a mother. So the anecdote is the imagination of boys and girls flower about parenting about age 2 for girls and much later, 4 years later for boys. And not all boys ever imagine themselves as being a good father. And thus the educational system is mentally retarded. It has not addressed the fact that young girls want to be a great mother starting at age 2. Boys want to be a great father. Some boys, not all, unfortunately. Some boys want to be great fathers by age 6 or so. And they precede that by knowing that they need a wife to help raise their children. That's the anecdotal evidence. Now the research. I want to stop there because I like your Sweetwater, Clearwater attitude. People can interrupt the speaker and ask questions. Have I made my little self clear? Have I made myself slightly clear of the imminence, the power of the imagination? I will go further, but I'll wait for any comments so far. Am I hitting your point? Okay,
We have
I
Terry.
see.
We have Terry here. If you can unmute.
Thank you. Mr. William Maxwell, I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember me. You were in Montgomery about 10 years ago, and you're about ready to start a community in Selma. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Okay. Now, when you talk about the importance of imagination, that's something that I've been, I've had, all my life. Dreaming and all that kind of stuff. And I've always, you know, academically, I was always, inferior because, I was bored. The lessons would go in one ear and out the other, as my teachers would tell me. And it's just like I would be always out looking out the window because I don't want to be in the classroom. I want to be outside. Of course, that's me being a 6-year-old. And it's,
Difficult.
yeah, it's very
Difficult.
difficult. So I agree that, the present education system uh, destroys the imagination, so to speak, because they put in all this rigorous, recitation and all that memorization. It's just like, it leaves no room for the imagination. What are your thoughts?
I agree. So let me give you some of the science behind the idea that schools and parents should nurture the imagination of their children. The scientific evidence begins with a big question. 1957, Russia put up Sputnik, October 1957. Russia put up Sputnik in space. It was just slightly larger than a basketball. But the leadership of America, the intellectual, the technological, the political, the scientific leadership of America literally panicked. I happened to have been in Korea at the time, and we thought we could watch that Sputnik fly overboard or float overboard. We couldn't, but people were mesmerized by what the Russians had done. But that was not the only reaction, being mesmerized and panicking and screaming. The scholars around the world began to ask serious questions. What happened to American science that American technology allowed the Russians to move ahead of us? All kinds of problems went out. Congress doubled the scientific research budget and gathered in Massachusetts 37 of America's greatest scientists and about the same number of psychologists gathered. What has gone wrong with our teaching of science? But more fundamentally, David McClellan at Harvard and Everett Hagen at MIT wanted to know what happened to the American imagination that usually, at that time, in all scientific endeavors, led the world. So they did an intense study of the creative minds of all history, particularly at critical turning points such as the Industrial Revolution. They discovered, both Hagen at MIT and David McClellan at Harvard. David McClellan was a social psychologist at Harvard. They discovered that daydreaming, which is another form of imagining, daydreaming spikes at certain points in history and in certain places in history. I have behind me a book on the geography of genius. But here's the amazing discovery that McClellan gave the world, that educators so far, for over 50 years, have ignored. The Industrial Revolution, an industrial revolution that we can study intensively. The Industrial Revolution has a fundamental cause, a spiritual cause that began, of all places, in Switzerland. Sometime long ago, 500 years ago, a preacher arose in Switzerland named John Calvin. And he said to the world, if you are a Christian, your job is to improve the world. He had studied St. Mark of the Bible and came to the realization that Christianity, all religions, in fact, but he particularly picked on Christianity because that's the one he knew best. All religions, and Christianity included, believe that humans are designed to improve the world in some significant way. So he preached from the Cathedral of Geneva, and everybody in Europe who was thinking seriously about life and theology and God and so on rushed down to Geneva to hear John Calvin. And one of the persons who came down was John Knox of Scotland. And John Knox said, okay, here's an idea. We humans are supposed to improve the world. How are we going to do it? And so he invented the family hour, the most sacred institution in the world. And what goes on during the family hour? It's after dinner, the dishes are washed, all the chores are done, and nobody's quite ready for bed yet. The family hour, you would read from the Bible or John Calvin's Pilgrim's Progress. And sometimes you would be inspired to do something good. For example, at that time, the literacy rate, let's say 1600, the literacy rate in England was 10%. The literacy rate in Scotland was much higher, as was in Japan, who had a similar epiphany, of a spiritual epiphany. So guess what McClellan and Everett Hagen found? Something like 80% or 85% of all the great inventions of the Industrial Revolution did not come from Germany or France or Italy or Spain or from Wales or from England or from Ireland. 80% of the great inventions came out of Scotland. Now notice the miracle here. At the time of Shakespeare's father, 1500, say, there was not one wheel in all of Scotland, not one wheel in all of Scotland. 2,500 years earlier, there were wheels all over Iraq, Persia, and the Middle East. So we could think of the Scots as being 2,000 years behind the people of the Middle East. We could have said that they were inferior. We could have thought of them as backward savages. Well, there were some backward savages among the Scots, but also in Scotland, the imagination was put loose, given some freedom, encouraged, and blossomed. So the Industrial Revolution, a case study in the imagination. By the way, how they chose the 7 p.m. hour is a kind of synchronicity. One time I'm in Africa, the University of Wisconsin had a large teaching project to try to help the Muslim North, the 60 million or so northern Nigerians who were predominantly Muslim, to catch up with the predominantly Christian southern part of Nigeria. And I was the curriculum development person for that project and later the head of that project. So I decided I'd better find out a little bit about the culture here in northern Nigeria. So I decided to teach a course at Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, the only university for that 60 million population, the only university in the north. So I talked to Dr. Audu, the vice chancellor, president. Dr. Audu, I'd like to offer a course on research to your students in education. Wonderful, he said. Let's organize it. So 6 students signed up. I didn't want to give them a lot of lectures, so I sent them into the villages. Find out what is the formal educational system in the typical Muslim village in your region. And please find out what is the unformal or the informal or the subtle ways that villages teach each other the laws and rules of their culture. And they discovered about 7 o'clock at night, halfway toward darkness, somewhere around sunset and people getting sleepy, about 7 o'clock, the village children would gather and tell stories to each other. Believe it or not, that 7 o'clock hour, the children would daydream and tell stories and learn their culture and tell stories. The parents were somewhere else, but Calvin and Knox, and by the way, Wesley later in England would discover, yep, there's a wonderful mental time. Let's daydream a bit. Let's think of the future. There are more kinds of stories such as that tell me and tell all of us, let us dream. What as I started earlier, what Dr. David Langnes said was Abdu'l-Baha in some answered questions and posited the idea that we can connect to God very easily because the blueprint or the DNA is built into us. It has to be there somehow. So my final quote proof is not from Aristotle or Plato or Kant or any of the others that David Langnes cite. My proof is from a scientific study. And it's a brief study that all of you can imagine very easily. Our closest kin, genetically, biologically, are bonobo chimpanzees. So an experiment was done. Little juvenile baby bonobo chimpanzees was shown a scene of a bullying bonobo taking a doll or taking some food away from other children. And then later, that same bully was shown to those bonobo children or infants or adolescents, the equivalent. And guess what? The bonobo, our closest cousin, identified with and in effect approved of the bullying behavior by the bad bonobo. The same scenes were shown to human children. And when that bully was shown on the screen of these little 6-year-old children, the human children were repelled by the evil force that still exists in our bonobo cousins. David Langnes' point was that planted inside the human soul is something that is not animal, something that is divine. And that divinity, Abdu'l-Baha said, takes 4 forms. The Muslims explained it very beautifully. God is infinite in size and scope and capacity. So he takes a pinch of himself. This is a metaphor. Don't take it literally. God takes a pinch of himself and puts it into the mind. He puts it into the DNA of every human. Thus, when Moses said we were all created in the image of God, Moses was telling us When you look at another human, see inside that human divinity, creativity, potential genius. Time to stop. Time for questions and comments.
So you said a lot about daydreaming and the value that it holds. How do you think we can increase the opportunity for us to engage in this stimulating behavior productively?
1,000 ways. One of my good friends, Korea, who's in Korea, John McHenry. John McHenry is a longtime Baha'i family. He passed away a few years ago, but his father, his ancestor, was signed the U.S. Constitution from Maryland, the McHenry family. So if you look up who signed the U.S. Constitution, you find the name McHenry. That family is still very Baha'i. John McHenry, I asked his children one time, all of whom, that we had 3 children. I was invited to the funeral of McHenry in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I asked his children, tell me your relationship with your father. Almost weekly, they told me, John would take them on nature hikes and just talk to them. The Japanese have now invented another form of soul cleansing. They call it soul bathing, where you go out into the forest and inhale the fresh new oxygen that the trees are giving us. And something happens inside the brain when we do that. Actually, the Hindus discovered this 2,500 years ago. The Hindus knew somehow, God knows how they knew it. They knew that the brain, which is only a few percent of the body, the brain absorbs 25% of the body's oxygen. The brain is extraordinarily active all the time. So they knew to keep their brain functioning, they had to clean out their nasal passages. So the Hindus invented a little pot to clean out the nose, to clean out the breathing system. So notice, please, whenever you have a national spelling bee, guess who's going to win? Always the Hindus. The Hindus have some secrets of getting the brain kick started. I'm not saying that cleaning the brain stimulates the imagination, but the imagination, Einstein summed it up best. Logic will take us from A to Z. Logic, research, will take us from A to Z. But Einstein said, your imagination will take you everywhere.
Thank you so much for that. And again, the questions that the audience may have, simply unmute yourself. We're very happy to have your question that you may wish to bring. We have Ned Walker, please.
Hi, Prof. Maxwell. How are you?
I'm fine. Good to see you. Where are you located, Mr. Walker?
We're in Michigan.
Oh,
You and I met on pilgrimage in June 2010. So nice to see you again.
oh, that was a
Yes,
wonderful pilgrimage for
it
me, at
was.
least. It
hmm
was a sweet pilgrimage.
It was, especially with you there.
There were lots of us there, at that time.
There were. How can we trust our imagination? I want to ask you this question. I know Baha'u'llah talks about vain imaginings at times, but you say, and I agree with you, the imagination is a powerful positive tool or part of us. How do we know when our imagination is serving us versus disserving us? Could you help us think about this idea?
Last night I was worried that somebody would come up with that question. So I went down to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, what does Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha say about the imagination? And ChatGPT was very frank. Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha exalted, but they warned us, don't trust it. Don't trust your imagination. Test your imagination out with logic and with scientific proof. Don't be misled. ChatGPT is a brilliant answer to you. Don't trust it. Believe in it. Believe in it and use it. Train it. But check it out with reality. And the reality, ChatGPT said, are the holy words of the prophets. If your imagination is contrary to the word of God, said it, let it get behind thee, Satan.
Thank you.
Can you repeat that again, what you just cited?
Don't trust your imagination. Believe in it. Train it. Use it. But the imagination is wild sometimes. And it comes sometimes from evil forces. And it sometimes needs to be suppressed. So it's there. It's powerful. But it is also not to be trusted. I'll give you a case of the imagination being true. Sometime in the 1800s, Jules Verne predicted humans would send objects into space. We humans have always dreamed of flying, but our imagination would only go so far and then we'd fall down from the sky. But he knew that one day we would conquer space, in a sense. Conquer meaning learn how to manipulate it and live in it and not be killed by it. So he imagined space flight, and he predicted accurately. His imagination predicted space flight. The first space flight from America will begin from the east coast of Florida. And then he said it would probably splash down in the ocean. Where did that imagination come from? That was not vain imagination. That was a connection to the future. Baha'u'llah makes the point very many times that our imagination, in our dreams, for example, will take us outside of time. So it's real, but we have to be cautious with it. I'll give you one more case. I have been studying the Nobel Prizes in science. And by the way, universities were invented by pagans, not by Christians, not by Jews, not by Muslims, not by Buddhists. The first university in the world was created 300 plus years before Christ, created by Ptolemy at the behest of Alexander the Great in Cairo, Egypt. And H.G. Wells said that that was the first university in the world. And for almost 800 years, the only university in the world, literally, the only university in the world devoted to discovering and inventing new knowledge. And that university, by the way, was destroyed about 415 in the Common Era by the Christians. They decided to destroy that university. Every book that had been collected from around the world was burned. Every brick was destroyed. The principal of the rector, the head of that university, her name was Hypatia, the most brilliant woman of her century. She was murdered on the steps of that university. And so the university, the creator of great new knowledge is our imagination and action. And so we must love the university. So I've followed the Nobel Prizes ever since 1950. And then there's an equivalent in mathematics, the Fields Medal in mathematics. And just a few years ago, big headline in all the great papers of the world, a woman wins the Fields Medal, and she's Iranian. Oh my God, is this a miracle? Pray to God that some Muslim family had decided to follow the cookbooks and find a child who's brilliant and train that child to win the Fields Medal. I was praying that that child, that mathematician, educated at Harvard, a professor at Stanford, I was praying that that child would have been trained by Baha'i families. Guess what? She was a Muslim. I was so disgusted with the Persian Baha'is that they let the Muslims beat them to the draw. By the way, that young mathematician, she was trained by her brother, who was acting like a second father to her. Anyway, my point is that the imagination creates new knowledge all the time.
We have a hand raised from Terry.
Hello, Apa. Yeah, just got a second follow-up. When Abdu'l-Baha was in North America, he talked about the imagination. Everybody asked him, how was he able to come up with a lot of these talks that he had? And Abdu'l-Baha said something about, he sees something in a book before he gives a speech, and then that inspires him to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he sees a scroll. In another, I'm not sure which conversation that scroll appears in Abdu'l-Baha's explanation, but he sees a scroll rolling up before him, and then he knows exactly what to say. And by the way, his greatest talk on science was given in Washington, D.C., to the Black Baptists of Washington, D.C. He appealed to the Black Baptists of Washington, D.C., literally appealed, teach your children science. Teach your children science. So there are 1 billion Blacks around the world. Not one of them has bothered to train their children how to become a great scientist. I have in front of me, right here, the cookbook, a cookbook on how to train a scientist, written by a professor at Harvard. She studied 2,400, all of America's greatest scientists, and gleaned from 65 of them in personal interviews precisely how they were raised. And what is the most important factor in the raising of a scientist? Guess what? It's the father who does it. So guess what the Kitabi Agdash tells every father? Rather, exhorts every father. Fathers, before the child enters school, your job is to teach your children not only language and culture, which Moses told fathers to do, but Baha'u'llah goes up further. Fathers, your job is to train your children in mathematics and science before age 6. Do all of you remember the shuttle Challenger that went up in the air in 1987 and exploded, killing 9 people? Feynman, professor of physics at Caltech, At the first hearing, what happened? What went wrong? He called for 2 glasses of water, one at room temperature and one with ice. And he called for some rubber bands. And he put rubber bands in the room temperature water and rubber bands in the ice water and let them sit for a while. Then he pulled them out. The rubber bands out of the normal water stretched, expanded. Then he pulled the rubber bands out of the ice water and pulled it, and it broke. Feynman proved in a few seconds the power of science to inform our reasoning. He knew that materials lose their elasticity when cold. But 2,000 scientists at Cape Canaveral were too stupid to say to the President of the United States, this is not the time for political statement for the State of the Union. Our temperature here at Cape Canaveral reached the freezing point last night. We should not endanger the lives of these 9 humans by sending them into space, hoping that the O-ring would expand appropriately. They didn't say that. Those 2,000 scientists kept quiet, and Challenger went off, killing 9 people instantly. The stupidity of not thinking carefully. And guess what? Of those 9 people killed, there was a woman, there was a Buddhist, there was a Jew, there was a Christian, and there was a Baha'i. You cannot find a single media on the planet that point out that synchronicity to a mankind ignorant of the way that God works to teach us our lessons.
It's very, very, very appreciated that you brought that up. I believe his name was Ronald McNair. Was that the name of the Baha'i astronaut that perished
Yes,
on that journey?
yes. He was trained at North Carolina A&T,
Wow.
and almost everyone has forgotten him.
Well, if people visit Kennedy Space Center in Florida, there is a tribute to these brave souls that lost their life on that mission. There is a tribute there. Well, with
Good.
that said, there's a lot to be gleaned from this idea of our imagination being something to engender, to support, to promote, and to be careful of. So I want to ask, and of course, there's a lot of positives, but I want to ask for those that may be worried because a lot of people have had very active imaginations, and sometimes I've heard, unfortunately, too often, that some people have overactive imaginations, which I know is a misnomer, of course. So how can we avoid our imaginations predominantly being fear-based or on negative emotions, negative thoughts? How can we curtail that and support positive, again, productive imagination? How can we identify and engender the right thing?
2 writers have addressed that particular problem. One was the guy who wrote the story of Pinocchio. When you lie, your nose gets longer. Remember that one? I think every child reads that little story. There's
You'd
a
be
spiritual
surprised. A lot of people don't know too much about Pinocchio unless they watch the Disney movie.
Yeah. Well, at least in my generation, almost everyone knew the story in school, even before school. But the point of that little story is that every thought you have, good or bad, has an effect upon your persona. It has an effect on your aura. It changes the way you look, the way you appear to people. It's a subtle change. Dorian Gray, the picture of Dorian Gray, another novelist, wrote the story much more dramatically. He was a guy who went out in debauchery and while living, and every night he would come home and look at his picture on the wall. And the picture on the wall began to change as he became more and more corrupt. The picture of Dorian Gray was turned into a great movie. I will give you an observation from living in 60 cultures. In America, when you look into the faces of people, let's say between 20 and 30 in America, it's very hard to find a face that reflects purity of character, righteousness. I taught psychology for 75 years around the world. I would often ask my students, what are your intentions for the future? What do you plan to be? And very often, the answer would be, I want to be happy. Happiness is not a goal. It's the byproduct of a goal. The goal has to be something noble. So guess who? Guess which 20 to 25-year-old children of young people on this planet radiate an aura of righteousness and purity. There are only two, the Mormons and the Mennonites. When I look in the faces of 20 to 25-year-old people around the world, the only time I see a projection, an aura of righteousness, right living, are in the faces of Mormon youth and Mennonite youth. What's in your brain, what's in your imagination, reflects itself to some degree in the aura you send out.
That is a lot to contemplate, to reflect on. And when you talk about this, I do need to note that a lot of people would go into negative statements on what not to do, but you responded in the way that in a positive sense what we should and can do. And I thought that it's important to note a lot of people can see the distinction when you have a person with positive energy exuding that positive energy and sharing that positive energy, inspiring people to engage in proper action, proper affairs, and those who are uh, coming from a perspective of what not to do. And the word no often appears more often, and what in the word can't comes up more often than the word can. I think that's very important to bring up. I appreciate that you brought it up. Thank you.
We have to learn how to train our children.
We have a hand raised from Alex Boyson, and before you unmute, please unmute Alex. As he unmutes, I think it's really important this idea that you brought up about the power of the words that we use. It's extremely important. The power of the words we choose to be the main ones in our dictionary that we use habitually and more often.
Correct. Alex Boyson, you're still muted.
Thank you. Dear William Maxwell, this is such a privilege to hear you speak. Yeah, I'm connecting from Arctic North in Norway. Yeah, it's soon no roots. So anyway, I remember there's Ruhia Khanum. Um, she said once that what Baha'is really need is imagination. And she was, of course, daughter of an architect, and she was creative and very yeah. And of course, she was also trained in her logic and yeah, and yeah, like science, Western science. So um, um, yeah. So when I think about that, I see that of course our Western civilization is based on the kind of it's the cerebral logic, linear thinking, and yeah, reductionism in a sense, uh, categorizing and so on. So that has shaped our civilization, our educational system, because it's kind of embraced the whole world today, at least. And so this, yeah, and for instance, the Prussian, or that was the German area. They're well known for their efficiency, you know, and so they're disciplined and everything, and they make great progress. Of course, they made great progress, and it has affected the whole industrial revolution, I think. So this mode of thinking, it has embraced the world, and education was instrumentalized for to serve the industrial revolution, which was exactly that very yes categorizing methodology. And so that's we're embedded in it in a sense that which is very conventionality and conformity and all of that. So um, I can understand why she said that maybe certain, yeah, maybe she said that in the West, so that's understandable. What the Baha'is really need is imagination to so it's interesting, of course. Thank you so much, and I'm glad you can speak to us. Bless you.
We also have to be grateful to the Christian Western European civilization. They gave us the scientific method, which Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah absolutely embrace and affirm. We always have to use the scientific method to test all proposed knowledge, test it with scientific principles. That's one contribution of Western civilization that the world owes to Western Europe. The other one is, of course, great music. About 1844, Western music took on a new role of not only being logical and mathematic like Haydn or Mozart wanted us to be, but also to be romantic and discover our heart. There's a Baha'i musician, by the way, who's been to Norway and all over Europe. He believes that Chopin, for example, is a reflection of the spirit of the Baha'i revelation. So we owe Europe two votes of thanks for the scientific method and great music. But we go on from there. Western civilization was deficient in not testing out the German theories of racism. Actually, the racism theory originated in France and Austria, but the Germans embraced it to the destruction of that continent almost. We have to be careful of the imagination, as Abdu'l-Baha warned, Baha'u'llah warned, but we must use it, but test it.
Yes, thank you. Indeed.
So I think it's a really good segue of having spoken on this concept of the scientific method and ultimately empiricism, being able to systematically draw forth evidence for ideas, observations, hypotheses, and developing a conclusion. I think it's really important the concepts we spoke here today and the incorporation of this scientific method into application of what we've been speaking about. So, applying what we've spoken about here, hypotheses that people may, the, the people joining today on the session or those watching, what is a helpful process you think we can apply what we learned here today? And I mean, sorry if I misspoke. I mean, we have the scientific method. What steps should we take to apply what we've learned and use the scientific method to understand a little more what we've just heard about?
That's a huge question, huge question. It'll take 10 hours just to respond to parts of it. But briefly, the most important psychologist at Harvard during my time there was a man named Erik Erikson. He did not have a master's degree, but Harvard wanted him as a full professor, so they gave him a master's degree. He never had a PhD, but he was the most eminent professor in psychology. And his book is called Childhood and Society. And in it, he outlined the 8 stages of life that all humans go through. Critically, he points out to people like John sitting here in front of us and people of your age group, 20 to 40, you have an obligation to invent something, create something new by the age of 45. And he said there's a curse if you don't do so. It's be creative or be stagnant. And the synonym for stagnant is stink. If you don't be creative, if you're not going to be creative, if you decide not to be creative, not to search for something new, to invent or to produce, your personality ultimately is going to stink. So that's your little curse. So let's scare people by saying, you have 45 years to produce something good or great. Create something, write a book, create a new recipe for apple pie if you want, whatever it is. Or create some beautiful children. Do something creative by 45. And then the last stage of life, Erikson points out, he did not use the word, but the equivalent is get ready for heaven. Imagine yourself getting ready for heaven. What you're going to take with you. I'll tell a personal story. My mother, raised in Arkansas in a family of 11, was a very intelligent woman, but she was very angry throughout her life. I didn't realize how angry she was. One time, I'm teaching at Ottawa University here in Phoenix, and my mother calls me, Junior, come down here. Mama, I'm busy. I can't come down there. Come down here. So I drive the 40 miles or 20, whatever it was. Mama, you're angry. Mama, I screamed at my mother. Mother, Mama, do you realize they don't let anybody angry into heaven? Mama, I screamed, literally screamed at my own mother. Mama, do you realize that they don't let angry people into heaven? She refused to answer. I left. A few years later, she's in a nursing home in California with my sister, near my sister. And she's on her deathbed now. Inside her room comes a big ball of golden light. That ball is so bright, it illumines the entire nursing home. It hovers over my mother's bed, goes out the door, and goes down the hallway. And everybody in that nursing home saw that light. And I knew that light had taken away all the pent-up anger that my mother had generated inside herself for 88 years. We have to learn, we humans have to learn, between age 45 and whenever we die, we've got to learn how to reconcile ourselves with the world and forgive whatever harms have done to us and forget our anger and get ready for heaven.
So I have a question about that because I've met a lot of people. Now, let me tell you, there are definitely people who are very much constant with how they feel, but I've met a lot of people who are very dynamic. And that means they may be quick to be happy, quick to be angry, and quick to resolve things. Can we say for those who may have some mishaps that it's never too late to make things right? And more importantly, if someone's upset, there's always a route to patching things up with whomever it may be and not being angry anymore. And yes, we have those moments, but just as quickly as we can get angry, we can resolve things. Of course,
Well,
all
I want to
mutually
disagree with you,
accepting
John.
parties.
It's very difficult to get rid of anger. It's very difficult. And most Americans can't do it. We have to train them how to do it. And here's a little simple one. About 60% of all American males, about 60% of all American males were neglected or abused by their fathers or abandoned. So I say to my students in psychology, you are not going to be a happy person until you go to your father and say to him as follows. You make an appointment. Dad, you abandoned us. You abused us. You left my mother to suffer, etc., etc. I want to tell you, I love you. I am obligated by God to love you. I want to love you. I want to forgive you for what you did to my family. When you abandoned us, I forgive you. That's a very difficult thing to say to your biological father. But it's very, very purifying. I am obligated to love you, and I forgive you. They know not what they do. When fathers abandon their children, they do not know the pain of abandonment that child will face and endure. He did it out of ignorance. Forgive him. That's a very difficult thing to do, but we can train our children to do that.
That was very powerful. That was very powerful. And I know for a fact that this is something that many people have not thought of yet. And this power of love and forgiveness and inculcating the importance of love as means to overcome these thoughts of hate. Of course, these thoughts of peace to be those that overcome thoughts of war and so on. It's extremely valuable, and it brings to mind these quotes from the Baha'i writings about opposing a thought of hate with a more powerful thought of love, which a lot of Baha'is are uh, exposing themselves to every day when they read the Baha'i writings every morning and evening. We have a hand raised with Alex Boyson, and because of our time, I think this will be our last question for today. Alex, please.
Is Alex the one in Norway?
Yes,
Sorry?
Alex Boyson from Norway. Yes, sir.
Anyway, it's an honor, really. John, Yeah, William. Yeah, my question. I'm curious if you'd like to share something about how your imagination brought you to so many countries, and how it perhaps even brought you to the Baha'i Faith, and in all your service, your wonderful service that you've done, and you've been privileged to experience, and all of that. Really, thank you.
That's a long one too. Long. I was sent to Korea by the U.S. Army, and actually, I fell in love with Korea. It was poor as Haiti at the time, but there was something spiritual about Korea. For example, the only king in the world ever to appoint a Sangoma, the lowest possible class of persons, into his cabinet was done by King Sejong the Great of Korea. So when Durand lists all the great kings of the world, the great thinkers of the world, he puts Plato first. Well, I'm going to write a letter to Mr. Durand, Will Durand, the great historian. Mr. Durand, how could you ignore King Sejong the Great of Korea when he did all kinds of great things, including affirmative action, of putting the Sangnom, the outcasts, the lowest caste, into his cabinet? Not even Lincoln could do that. Imagine what would have happened to Lincoln had he appointed a black man to a cabinet position. So I was not by will, by my own desire, sent to Korea. It's the hand of God that sent me there, I think. And I'm blessed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maxwell, for being here with us to share all these words of wisdom. And of course, all of you here who have asked questions, who have engaged, and those of you who have participated on YouTube, on Facebook, here on Zoom. Once more, we are very grateful that Dr. Maxwell was here to discuss this very important topic that all too often is not served enough. So, with that in mind, we welcome you once more, Dr. Maxwell, to another session. As soon as you're ready to do another one, we'll be happy to have you, as we've enjoyed having your company in person at the Clearwater Baha'i Center and once more here on Zoom. We look forward to another with you. I want to call everyone's attention to the YouTube recordings that we've posted online on youtube.com. If you go to the channel Clearwater Baha'is, you can find this recording and you can share it. And for those of you who have yet to view it, I've pasted the link to the video in the Zoom chat, which over the next minute or two, you can copy and paste or just click on it right now. For those of you on YouTube, if you like this video, please click that you like it. If you're logged in, click that you like it and subscribe. This allows us to, of course, share more content like this as we spread that positivity. So I wanted to ask Dr. Maxwell if you have any final words, and right after that, we'll be done for this afternoon.
It's morning here.
This morning for you, yes. He joined at 8 a.m., everybody, just so you know.
Okay. Sorry, John, can I ask Mr. Maxwell? Is that David Lagnus's talks, are they recorded? Or is there the Flagstaff firesides, are they on Zoom or anything like that? I became a Baha'i. I learned of the Baha'i Faith in Flagstaff in 1967. And I knew David Lagnus when I was in Arizona many years ago.
I don't believe that the Flagstaff fireside that I referred to, which was 2 nights ago, was recorded. But David is popular. He also has many. If you Google his name, I'm sure I've Googled his name several times. You'll find him, find his books and some of his talks available. David Langness. If you don't find it, you can email me and I will put you in touch with him. My email is Professor William Maxwell 3@gmail.com. You can email me and I'll find a way to connect you. Professor William Maxwell 3@gmail.com. But you'll probably find him very easily.
Thank you. I should think so, yes. No, I just, well, I haven't seen him for years. I moved to Southern Africa in 1982, and I'm still here.
I didn't know we had somebody from Africa here.
We're in Bulawayo. Yes, the sun has set now.
Ooh. Well, this is story time. Grab some children and tell them some stories.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
So I think it's good for us to wrap up for today then. We hope all of you here have enjoyed this talk. Again, if you liked it, please press like and subscribe for more of this beautiful content. We hope